Good morning. Welcome to the 2017 Pre-College and Youth Outreach Conference here at the University of Michigan. I'm William Collins, Executive Director of the Center for Educational Outreach here at the University of Michigan, and it has been my pleasure, my honor, to serve as chair of this year's Pre-College and Youth Outreach Conference. Thank you all for joining us. The Planning Committee has worked diligently over the course of the last year, organizing this conference, identifying presenters who will share ideas, approaches, and strategies to move our great state forward in terms of educational attainment. I want to take a moment to express my sincere gratitude to the Planning Committee. They've worked very hard, and I need to give a special shout out to Adam Scotchless from the Center for Educational Outreach. Can I ask members of the Planning Committee to stand and receive our applause? Their names appear on the inside back cover of your program, so you can see everyone who joined us and worked very hard over this last year. I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. They appear on page 4 of your program. And I want to give special thanks to the Michigan College Access Network, MCAN, and to the Office of University Outreach and Engagement at our sister institution, Michigan State University. We thank all of our sponsors. Go Blue! We want to thank all of our sponsors. We appreciate their support. I want to point out as well that in the concourse, we have several vendors and people from other universities here with us. They provide us some materials. We encourage you to stop by, gather those materials, find out some useful information, and be in touch with them in the future. At this time, I would like to introduce, to give us some welcoming remarks, our Vice Provost and Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Robert Sellers.
Good morning, everyone. No. We gotta have a little bit more energy than that. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right. First and foremost, I'd like for us to just take a moment of silence as we think about those who were tragically struck down this weekend. If we could just have a moment of silence and remembrance and out of respect for those who've lost their lives. Okay. Now I'd also like to, as I look out over this wonderful audience, to invite some folks to come a little bit closer. I promise that I do not have cooties. So in fact, what I'd like to do is invite all those from Michigan State. Would you please raise your hands? Since you got the better of us the last, 3 weeks ago, we invite you right here in the seats of honor, the tables of honor, so please come join us. Congratulations. And do we have anybody from Ohio State? Because your table is outside and around the corner. Just teasing. I want to first, on behalf of President Schlissel, the Regents, the Board of Regents of the University of Michigan, Provost Martin Filbert, welcome you here to the University of Michigan for this Michigan Pre-College Youth Outreach Conference. This is a conference that is very near and dear to our heart. I want to also take this time to thank publicly Nick and the wonderful Center for Educational Outreach team, as well as the broader planning committee for the wonderful work that they've done in pulling the conference together today. Your goals here very much align with our goals here at the University of Michigan. As some of you may know, the University of Michigan is currently in the midst of a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic planning process. We've completed the planning process. We've actually just completed year one with respect to the implementation of those plans. In dedicating ourselves to this planning process and the efforts to make Michigan more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive, we realize that in order for us to be successful, we also need to make sure that the K-12 pipeline is also successful with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. That we definitely can't do this alone, that many of you and many of the spaces and places that you represent have been dealing with and doing battle on these issues far longer than we have as an institution. So it's in our best interest, and actually all of our collective best interests, if we were to find as many different ways to partner with communities, with K through 12 schools, in this effort to make the University of Michigan more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And quite frankly, it's not just the University of Michigan issue, it's also our friends at Michigan State and all the other universities here at Michigan. Because if higher education in Michigan isn't more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive, we as a state, and quite frankly, a nation and a world, will suffer. In our understanding and our rationale for dedicating ourselves to issues of DEI, we recognize the fact that in order for us to be excellent as an institution of higher education, we have to have all available talent, have all opportunities to come to the University of Michigan. As our president is fond to and frequently notes, that while talent is equally distributed throughout all of our communities, opportunity is not. And to address that inequity, that responsibility falls upon us. If ever the day was there, which I don't personally think was, but if ever the day actually existed where we could just sit back and wait for the most talented folks to decide to apply to the University of Michigan and allow us to sit back and choose from that talent, if that day ever really existed, it is definitely gone. So we as a society are facing major questions, major issues, major problems. And if we are going to address those problems in the future, we need all the talent that is available to work on those problems. And not only do we need all of the talent, we need to create the kind of environment where we can take advantage of that talent. We know through research, and quite frankly, through our own personal experiences, that when you have to solve a problem, it is better to have as many different perspectives around the table than to just have one perspective. So like right now, if I threw out a problem for you, as you're sitting in your round tables here, would you rather be at a table where everybody has exactly the same lived experience as you? Or would you want to be around a table where people are coming with different perspectives, asking the question in different ways, posing different solutions, and bringing their life experiences to bear? So how many would want to be at the same table, the table with everybody else like you? Trick question. All right. Now, that sounds good. That sounds wonderful. But the problem is, we also know the more diverse the table, the less easy the conversation. So if the issue was we just wanted to have a conversation, then you probably would want more people that are like you, most of us. Well, we can't afford that luxury anymore. We have to create an environment in which not only do we have diverse perspectives, but an environment in which those diverse perspectives have an opportunity to contribute. So if I, again, using the table analogy, if I said, all right, half of you are not allowed to speak just because we don't think that you know much. And then of that remaining half, you're allowed to speak, but you can't speak because something really painful happened to you before coming into this room, and your mind is on that. In those instances, diversity is not very helpful. Doesn't matter how diverse you are, it's not very helpful. That's why it's got to also be about equity and inclusion. So that's our framework as an institution with regards to where we are and where we're trying to be. And a big part of that is reaching out, developing partnerships, attempting to make our university more diverse. So that's why we've invested heavily in units like our Center for Educational Outreach, our Ginsberg Center, and other centers on campus with the primary focus of developing mutually beneficial partnerships in the communities. That's also why we've put forth our Go Blue guarantee, which says that any student within the state of Michigan whose family makes less than $65,000 can come to the University of Michigan tuition free for 4 years, plus whatever other financial aid they're eligible for. And we've worked very hard, raising over $1 billion in our recent capital campaign that is earmarked directly for student financial aid, student need-based financial aid. So we are committed to trying to change the paradigm, and we need your help to do so. So I'd like to invite you, as this conference goes on, to please look around, talk to folks around here, get a sense of what Michigan may have to offer, what are ways in which we can partner and be better partners to you in trying to improve the not only K-12 pipeline, but higher education access across all the universities here in the state of Michigan. So with that, I'm going to shut up, because it's always important to realize when you're just the opening act versus the star. And so you all didn't come here to hear me. You came here to hear a really wonderful speaker who I will now get off the stage so that we have an opportunity to hear. Just again, thank you all for coming. Have a great conference, and go blue. And go green, and go white.
Thank you, Rob. My task at this point is to help frame our discussions for the rest of the day. And I want to start by referencing Brian Whiston, who is the state of Michigan's Superintendent and Chief Executive Officer of the Department of Education. He cannot join us today, but he did provide us with a videotaped message, and it appears on our website. If you haven't seen it, please take a moment at some point today or when you return to your campus or your home to do so. Because in that message, Superintendent Whiston reminds us of just why it is important for us to advance college attainment in our state. The superintendent, along with Governor Snyder, has set a commendable goal of Michigan becoming a top 10 state in terms of educational attainment. It is sobering for us to realize today we are in the bottom third of the 50 states. So we have much work to do. Superintendent Whiston has urged the higher education community to work collaboratively with schools, community organizations, local college access networks, and others to achieve this goal, because it is vital to our state's economic future. I encourage everyone to use today's conference to network and forge the kinds of collaboration that will do just that. It was in 2008 that college access advocacy groups came together to call for a national commitment to increase college attainment rates in the United States. The big goal, as it became known, was endorsed by numerous organizations, including the Lumina Foundation, the College Board, the Gates Foundation, the National Governors Association, and the Obama administration. And it sought to achieve a national goal of 60% of the United States adult population obtaining a high-quality post-secondary degree by the year 2025. The need was obvious. College degree attainment rates in the United States had hovered around 38% for 40 years. Yet our increasingly technology-oriented society required more workers with advanced training to populate a future workforce heavily reliant on computer-based and information-related jobs. Moreover, while college degree attainment in the United States held steady at 38%, other countries, both in developed and underdeveloped parts of the world, were making significant strides in higher educational attainment for their citizens, with the result that the United States dropped from being the leader in educational attainment worldwide to being ranked number 11 out of the 30 industrialized countries of the world. This, according to data from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. By comparison, Canada, our neighbor to the north and largest export trading partner, already has a college attainment rate of 60%. And a country like South Korea has a college attainment rate of 64%. All of this while our college attainment rate remained virtually the same for a 40-year period. Since establishing the big goal, the United States has made some progress. We have seen an increase in post-secondary college attainment since 2008, but it has been modest. 10 years after setting the big goal, the college attainment rate now stands nationwide at about 41%. Thus, we are not on track to reach 60% by 2025. Indeed, in the state of Michigan, the bachelor's degree or higher attainment rate is only 29%, and the associate's degree attainment rate is 10%. Together, associate's and bachelor's degrees, we're at about 39%, lower than the national average. The progress made so far in college attainment amounts to an increase of about 1% per year. At that rate nationally, we'll reach only 49% by 2025, and in the state of Michigan, we'll be only at about 47%. Michigan would remain in the bottom third of our 50 states. This is the college attainment scenario in the nation and in our state. Yet workforce needs are clear and compelling. More than 70% of jobs in Michigan now require training beyond high school. But according to data from the ACT, less than 25% of Michigan high school graduates are college ready upon graduation from high school. Let us remember that education, especially post-secondary education, remains the best path for upward mobility and securing one's future. The world economies continue a relentless shift away from agro-industrial-based work and towards information-based work. Now, certainly agriculture and industrial prowess will remain core elements of world economies, but they will be infused with sophisticated computerized systems. Developing those systems, managing those systems, and operating those systems will require sophisticated skills of the sort that are developed in college. Let us also remember that in the United States, while half of all people from high-income families hold at least a bachelor's degree, only about 10% of those from low-income families do. We have to do better. Importantly, attaining a goal of 60% of adults holding post-secondary degrees means getting more low-income, first-generation, and underrepresented minority students into and through college. Doing so will provide the knowledgeable labor force we need, spur economic innovation and growth, and serve to benefit our state and the nation. Clearly, we have urgent work to do. I'm confident that today's speakers and presentations will highlight challenges faced in advancing college attainment, opportunities and strategies for improving college attainment rates, and evidence-based impacts that collectively help move the needle toward improving college access and success in the United States. I trust that these ideas will serve to help you in your work to advance college access throughout our state. At this time, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Kim Lajana, and she will introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kim Lajana, the Associate Director at the Center for Educational Outreach. At CEO, our mantra is to inform, engage, and inspire. We believe in informing students because the research shows that providing resources, information, and support, you can significantly increase a student's likelihood to pursue post-secondary education. We believe in engaging students by providing opportunities to engage with ideas and explore academic disciplines and career paths as an important way to help students prepare for life after high school. These experiences have a significant impact on student aspirations. College aspiration does not happen overnight. It's a mindset and belief that needs to be cultivated through meaningful and active engagement. It's these experiences that inspire students and motivate them to reach higher. These experiences allow students to make connections and envision themselves in college. Developing that belief and sense of belonging is a powerful motivator. We are all here to inform, engage, and inspire the next generation of students. There is no one who does this better than Jaime Casap. Jaime is Google's education evangelist. He has worked at Google for 12 years talking about education and the role technology plays in it. An evangelist is someone who brings good news, and he thinks there's some really good news about the future of education. I heard his story on Michigan radio last week and learned that education changed his life. Casap is the son of a single mother, an immigrant from Argentina. He was born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York, and grew up like many people there at that time on welfare and food stamps. In his words, "This is where my passion for education comes from. It is because I believe that education is what disrupts poverty. I believe that education can change a family's destiny in just one generation, and he is living proof of that. He believes the future of education is right now, and I am between you and his inspiring words. Without further ado, please give Jaime Casap a warm welcome."
Good morning. I want to thank the Education Outreach team for having me here today. But before I start, I walked in here early this morning, and I saw the vice provost standing on a giant ladder above this thing up here. And then he invited the Michigan State team here. So I would just be careful about sitting underneath that. Anyway, so just keep looking up just in case. He was really upset about the Michigan State loss, so I don't know what that means. Anyway, so thank you very much for having me. I want to start with some contact information. Thank you for that introduction. I've been at Google for the last 12 years. And just to give you a little bit of background on what I've done at Google, I was part of the original team that launched Google Apps for Education at the university level with Arizona State University. Behind me is the CIO, Adrian Sainer. He was the CIO at the time of ASU. We launched Google Apps at ASU in 2006, worked with a bunch of universities, and then launched Google Apps into K-12, and then I saw this little cool tool internally called a Chromebook and launched that into education. So my team has close to 70, 80 million users using our tools across the world, and we have Chromebooks in classrooms all over the world as well. So my role at Google is to work with different teams that are doing things in education, that are doing things, building tools and services, and then thinking about how we implement those into the education space, or how education can benefit from the tools that we create. And so there's some contact information. I'm pretty active on Twitter. For those of you in the education space that aren't using Twitter, I think you're missing out. I think there's some great conversations going on Twitter. I think there's some great folks that you can follow that bring great research, bring ideas. I think every day I pull up another article that someone shared on Twitter that I learned from. So I think it's a great way to keep networks going. We can have this conversation going on all year, not just at this event. So I wanted to share that information. It's a good way to get a hold of me too. That's how my wife gets a hold of me, through Twitter. Anyway, I want to start with this idea of the importance of education, why we care about education so much. And as mentioned, I believe that education disrupts poverty. I believe that education changes a family's destiny in one generation. And as I mentioned in the interview that we did with NPR last week, it's a personal passion because I am a first-generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York. Any New Yorkers in the room? Not one? Oh, there's one. You're usually louder than that. That's why I expect a loudness coming out of New Yorkers. But not the Hell's Kitchen that you go visit today when you go see Hamilton. I'm talking about the Hell's Kitchen from the 70s and 80s. That was not a great place to grow up. It was not a great community. There was a movie called Escape from New York back in the 80s, and I thought that was actually a documentary. That's what it felt like living there, and I wanted a different life. And so what I saw as the common denominator across the board was education. When I saw successful people, I saw that they had education. So graduated high school, went to college, went to graduate school, and here I am standing in front of you because of education. I believe education has given me the opportunity. I've had some amazing milestones in my career last week. I don't even know what day it is. Last week, I spoke to all the deans of colleges of arts and sciences from across the country. I've been doing events like that for the last couple of years, and it's these amazing milestones. I had one of those milestones a couple of summers ago when the First Lady, Michelle Obama, asked me to come speak to about 200 students that were growing up the way I grew up, to talk to them about higher education. It's part of our Reach Higher initiative that I'm sure you're all familiar with. And the 60 or so organizations that supported those kids, she wanted me to come talk to them about why it's important to go to college, why it's important to think about beyond high school, not just college, but certification programs, college, community college, whatever it is, but to think beyond high school. And she wanted me to come to the White House to speak to them about that. And I said, let me check my calendar. No, you wish you were that cool. No, of course, you show up. So then you go, but you don't know where this is happening. You're so excited. And then you get there, you're all nervous. And then you're speaking in the East Room of the White House. And this is what that looks like when you're speaking in the East Room of the White House. Probably the most nervous I've ever been in my life. Doesn't this look like one of those pictures you get at the state fair? Where they green screen you into the background? When my friends saw this picture, they weren't impressed that I spoke in the White House, right? That's what your friends are supposed to be like. They were impressed that I owned a suit, and that's it right there. I'm actually going to a wedding on Friday, and my wife is like, "Where's the suit?" Because it's just one. I have one suit. She wants to make sure I have it out and ready to use for the wedding. Now, that to me is what we all strive for, right? We gather at events like this because we understand that education is that important. That the American dream, the American ethos is that you work hard, you get your education, you can take a kid from Hell's Kitchen, New York, and put him in the East Room of the White House. That's the importance of education. But here's the thing we sometimes don't consider. That the impact that we have on students goes on for generations and generations and generations. That you're going to have an impact on students that you will never meet in your entire life. Because now I have my kids. This is them. No, don't awe them. You don't know them. They're a pain in the butt. Anyway, so I have a 25-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 3-year-old. That's right. I can only handle one child at a time. I like it that way. But my 25-year-old is actually living in Hell's Kitchen, New York right now. Living her dream, working at CNN, living in Hell's Kitchen, New York. Everything that she wanted to do when she thought about her future, she's doing today. And it's because she graduated from ASU 3 years ago, and we never talked about college. We never had to have a conversation about whether she should go to college or not. She just assumed she was going to college because I went to college and her mother went to college and people in her life went to college. That's what she saw. That was her experience. She actually assumed she was going to go to graduate school her whole life because I went to graduate school and her mother is also a teacher and she went to graduate school. She assumed I was going to pay for that too, but we solved that problem. My 16-year-old is talking about what his higher education experience is going to be like. Not necessarily, this is where I'm going to go to college, but this is what I want to experience. This is the experiences that I want to gain after I graduate from high school. We don't have to have a conversation about whether he should get a higher education. He knows he has to. That's the impact that we have on students, that it goes on for generations and generations and generations. And if that's true, we should probably take education pretty seriously. And the first place I like to start is this realization that we are not preparing kids for this world anymore. And sometimes I feel like we still are. That we are not preparing kids for jobs that look like this. And that what we really should be focused on in what we do is focusing on helping kids through the future that they face. But here's the thing, unlike back then, where the future was pretty far away, I argue that the future's already here. And those jobs that used to look like that still resemble that, but now they kind of look like this. The Bureau of Labor Statistics predicts that there will be 1 million computer science jobs available in the next 8 to 10 years, and that number is just for computer scientists. It doesn't include all the supporting roles that support computer science. Doesn't include all the roles that support computer science, right? With design, but HR, marketing, finance, everything that has to do with the world of computer science, technology, and information and data sciences. This is an economic issue as well. the average computer science graduate makes about 40% more than the average college graduate. And sometimes that number is close to double what the average salary is. And here in Michigan, I wrote these numbers down because I think it's important to highlight. So here in Michigan, the average computer science graduate makes $80,000 a year versus the average salary of $47,000 a year. So what happens in our most vulnerable communities if all of a sudden we can double salaries? What's the economic impact of that? And again, not 20 years from now, not 10 years from now, today there are 12,392 open computer science jobs available in this state. That's 3.8 times the average demand of other industries. In 2015, only 1,793 computer science graduates graduated in Michigan, and 16% of them were female. In 2016, only 962 high school students took the AP computer science exam. 22% of them were female. And in Michigan, only 71 schools offer the AP computer science program. And that's 11% of the schools that offer AP programs in the state. So you can see that it's not that education is broken, it's that the future has changed, and what we need to do is catch up to the future, to take the best of what we know of what good education is and help prepare kids for that future, because that future has a lot to do with computer science and technology. Now, what's the role of technology in all this? Well, first is the realization that we've been talking about technology for a long time. This afternoon, I'm going to get on an airplane, and I'm going to pretend like I put my phone in airplane mode, like we all do. But we've been putting computers on airplanes for a long time. This is a hard drive being lifted onto a plane in 1956. You had to put it in airplane mode back then, too. Now, if you were a business in 1956, you could lease this machine to do computing, to do storage, to do data analysis. You could lease this for about $3,800 a month in 1956 dollars. And it's a 5 megabyte hard drive. Think about what 5 megabytes is worth today. We've been talking about technology for a long time. And in education, we've been talking about technology forever. Since the beginning, actually. In the 1900s, movies were going to revolutionize education. All we had to do is put up movie screens and kids would be okay. In the 50s, we talked about television revolutionizing education. And we've been talking about computers in education since the 60s. I took a computer class when I was in 9th grade because I was told that computers were going to be important in my future. And I learned how to program in BASIC. And maybe the old people like me in the room will remember this experience, but I wrote like 5,000 lines of code to make a bird fly across the screen on a Commodore 64. Do you guys remember that? Yeah. It didn't even look like a bird. It was just a squiggly line that just went across the screen. So what's different today? Why is it that we're having a deeper conversation about the role of technology in what we do in education? Well, I think there's a couple of things that are going on. First is that we have some amazing research on what good learning is. Everyone in this room who is an expert in education knows what good learning looks like. We know that the research tells us that it has to be relevant, that it has to be engaging, that it has to be personal. We know that the standard method of learning, like what we currently use of me sitting here talking to you guys, doesn't work when you do it every day over a period of 12 years. We know these things. We just haven't been able to implement the good ideas that we do have. I believe that we're finally starting to look at technology as a way to implement those good ideas. We don't have to invent anything new. I would challenge everyone to look at the last piece of great research that you've read and ask yourself, how do we bring those ideas to life using technology? Or better yet, what technology doesn't exist that we need to build to bring these ideas to life? And that's starting to happen. So that's one. Two, unlike when I took that computer class in 9th grade, technology's wrapped itself around the core of everything that we do, and we don't even recognize it anymore. For example, how many of you have not used technology today? How many of you have not used the web today? That's what I thought. How long did it take us to get to this point? It's like 9 o'clock in the morning. Most of us are on our technology. We still have crusties in our eyeballs when we wake up and we're on our devices. How long did it take us to get here? The iPhone is 10 years old. The BlackBerry, God forbid you have a BlackBerry. There's got to be one BlackBerry. BlackBerry users are usually the people that are like, you're going to pray this thing out of my cold, dead hands. They love that device. That's 13 years old. Do you remember we used to have to call the internet with our home phones? And the internet would be busy? And you were okay with that. You're like, the internet's busy. I'll just try later. And what was your reward when you got online? It was a bunch of pages with words to other pages that had words. And every once in a while, someone would post a picture, and you'd lose your mind. You're like, everyone gather. There's going to be a picture on my Commodore 64 here. And what's your expectation today with technology? I was frustrated last night. I was trying to catch up on some emails that I said in my head, I will take care of on the plane. And I was frustrated because the internet's too slow while I'm traveling through space. Our expectations of technology have changed, and we're the generation that was minding our own business when this thing called the internet showed up. If you think that's crazy for us, what does that mean for a generation of kids who don't know what the world looked like before Google? A generation of kids who don't know what the world looked like before smartphones and tablets and laptops. A generation of kids who don't know what the world looked like before Wi-Fi. Tell a 10-year-old kid that you're going to go stay at a place that doesn't have Wi-Fi, and they're going to look at you like you're crazy. Like, where are we going? Are we staying in a cave? Where is it that we're... I don't understand what's happening. Now, it's important to point out that I'm not saying that this generation, because they're born with technology, that they're different than we are. They're not. I would be careful of anyone who would stand here and say, this generation is born with technology and therefore they're experts at it. They just know how to use it, that their brains work differently. They don't. This generation can multitask and be on their laptops and their iPhones and do this and watch TV. No, they can't. They do two things at the same time poorly, just like we do two things at the same time poorly. But what we do need to keep in mind is how they think about learning is different. That how they think about learning is different than the way we think about learning because of the world that they're growing up in. They are the first true digital generation. How they think about learning is different. This picture here is of my 16-year-old when he was like 13. And he burst into my office. And he's got his laptop. And he's showing me his lines of code. He's not showing off that he's coding. He had a bug. He couldn't fix it. He wanted my help. I had no idea he was learning how to code. He never told me, hey, or he never asked me, hey, where can I learn how to code? What classes can I take? He never said, I can't wait till school starts so I can learn how to code. I mean, think about this. I work at Google, and he didn't ask me where he should learn how to code. He just started learning how to code. I actually made him take a step back to show me because I was so shocked that he was learning how to code. And he had been doing it for months. This generation thinks about learning differently because they have access at their fingertips. They have all the world's information at their fingertips. How do we take advantage of that? How do we create learning models that take advantage of that natural progression of information that this generation is used to? That they just access information and can look things up. They can learn things on their own. That's what we need to think about, because this generation, Generation Z, is different than previous generations. And I know every generation gets up and says this generation is different than the past generation. And I know every generation talks about the other generation like it's some kind of, crazy alien animal thing that came down from somewhere. But this generation is different in lots of ways. And we need to keep those things in mind. First, they are the first true digital generation. They're growing up with technology as part of their everyday lexicon, that they are just used to seeing the things they see, in the same way that we were the television generation, where television was just nothing magical about it. They don't see anything magical about technology. But there are some social things that we need to keep in mind too. We have to realize that this generation, and when we talk about Generation Z, I define them. Think about a 16-year-old. Think about my 16-year-old, right? Around the year 2000. That makes them the Great Recession generation. They're the first, that generation has been listening to economic turmoil for 16 years. 60% of them are worried about work and what work's going to look like for them. We grew up with this idea that if you work hard, you get your degree, you're loyal and dedicated at whatever company you work at, that you're going to succeed. And you're going to move up from analyst to manager to VP to senior VP. And that all you have to do is put your time and effort into it. This generation watched their parents do that and then lose their jobs. They watched their brothers and sisters go to college and then come home and not be able to find a job and live in their parents' basement. Even though those kids are fine today, that's not that's not the first image that they saw of college. They saw their brothers and sisters come home and live in the basement or live in their old rooms, struggling to find work while they're paying off student debt. It's no wonder that when you talk to this generation, 70% of them don't want to work for you at all. They want to do their own thing. They want to manage their own experience. They want to control their future. They also, if they do work for you, want to have meaning and fulfillment in the work that they do, because they saw their parents do the opposite. And they watched, and they know that 70% of Americans are disengaged with the work that they do. They don't want that experience at all. They are also the 9/11 generation. They don't know what the world looked like before 9/11. They're growing up with the fear of terrorism and now gun violence in all aspects of life. It's getting worse. And this generation has only watched the worst part. They don't know the better part. They don't know what it's like to go to the airport for fun, or what it was like to go through security before 9/11, right? Where you'd be like, hey, I don't have time for a check right now, my airplane's late, and you would just walk through the gate. They don't know that experience. They're watching violence, gun violence in elementary schools and high schools and colleges and churches and movie theaters and concerts. That's what they know. They're the we grew up with, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. This generation doesn't have that kind of mindset. They're growing up watching problem after problem after problem. They're also the first true generation that doesn't know what the world looked like before climate change and the expectations of climate change. 75% of this generation understands that humans have caused climate change. And 60% of them have no idea, can't understand why that's not our number one priority. No concept of why hey, let's fix the house first. And they can't understand why we don't fixate on that problem as the most important thing. That has shaped what they think about work. That has shaped what they think about their future. How is it possible that you can think about just getting a job to make as much money as you can when, in their view, the world is falling apart? This impacts how they see higher education. But here's the good news. 80% of them see the value of higher education. 80% of them also are concerned about the cost of higher education. But most of them feel like the benefit outweighs the cost. So they want to go to school. But because the cost is so high, they want to make sure they graduate. I mean, their biggest fear is going to college for 3.5 years and not getting their degree and then being stuck with the debt. So they want a different experience. They're looking for outcomes. They're looking for experiences when they go to college. How is it that we can create that kind of environment for them? Because this is the generation that's used to designing everything, and they want a say in what college looks like. You know, my 16-year-old is just amazed that I go to a store to buy sneakers. He can't understand that concept. He's a Converse guy. He's like, I don't understand why you would go to a store. Just pick a pair of Converse, the color, the size, and they'll just have them shipped to you. Like, the idea of going to a store and, like, what if they don't have your size or the color that you want? He just can't comprehend that. He's a video gamer, and he doesn't go to the store to buy a keyboard. He builds his own online. This generation is used to designing everything. How is it that we can give them that experience through college? Here's the secret, though, that we're doing at the university level. We're doing a really good job keeping the secret, which is that you can do that in college. I went to college 100 years ago, and I was able to design my course of study. We're not doing a very good job presenting that opportunity to this generation about having ownership and being able to create what their course of study is. We're still pitching them, hey, we have a great student union. We have a great weight room. They don't care. They want to know outcomes. They want to know what they're getting from that experience. They're the first generation that's open to a much less and a much more limited college experience, focused on the core things that they're looking for. Great professors, great courses, and great outcomes. How do we create those types of environments for them? That's why 82% of this generation goes to government websites or government-sponsored websites looking for information about where your college graduates end up and whether they graduate or not. Look, we were talking about this at the table. I remember when I was going to college, my philosophy wasn't my degree. My philosophy was to graduate from college, right? It didn't matter what my degree was in. As long as I graduated, I could do anything. Most people I know, as a matter of fact, and I'm sure the same is true for you, are working in a field that have nothing to do with what they got a degree in. Because we grew up with this concept that if you graduate from college, you'll be okay. This generation is looking for more meaning in that. They're looking for, what is my degree going to get me in the long run? And I'm not talking about a job, I'm talking about opportunity, because at the end of the day, what we need to think about is what this generation is facing. It's not about jobs. Again, we have to keep in mind, remind ourselves every day that we're not preparing our kids for this world anymore. This world doesn't exist any longer. As a matter of fact, the jobs that we think people do, for the most part now, are being done by little orange robots. We have a debate in this country about bringing back American jobs, when most of us in this room realize that only about 15% of the jobs in this country have been lost to trade. The rest have been lost to this little orange robot. Go visit an Amazon warehouse, 6 football fields deep, and you'll find 6 people that work in that warehouse. The rest of them are those little guys. Michigan, it started in Michigan when you think about auto plants and what happened with the automobile industry. Robots are building things. And even if you can find jobs that you think people do, there's a good chance that a lot of those roles or those segments of jobs are going to be done by things that look like this. And where we are with robotics, and where we are with automation, and how we're at the very, very beginning of what's possible with this. Even things like, someone drove me to the airport, and then someone drove the airplane, and then someone drove me here last night, And even those jobs are being replaced. There are 4.5 million Americans in this country who make a living driving something. Driving people, supplies, equipment, lots of things. And that's just for cars. That doesn't include all the other, trucks and other trains and planes and other things like that. And you could buy a self-driving car today. One day, don't be scared when you're driving on the highway and you're driving by a Tesla and the person's reading the newspaper in the front seat. That's today. What's that technology going to look like in 10 years? But again, this is something that's been going on for a long time. And let's see if there's somebody in the room. When's the last time you walked into a bank, filled out the little form, and stood in line, went up to the counter, the cashier or the bank teller and said, "I would like $20 in cash, please"? They would look at you like you're crazy. But here's the thing. Most of us go to ATMs to get cash, if you get cash at all. I travel for weeks with no cash in my pocket. But there are more bank tellers working in banks today than there were when ATMs were introduced in the 90s. The roles are changing. Automation and robotics are making roles change. And we're starting to see this, and it's happening in front of our eyes, and we don't even notice it. Everyone in this room, I assume, goes into a supermarket, which, by the way, is a whole thing that's going to fade away someday. But most of us go into a supermarket, and we see this, right? We see cashiers helping us process something that we know can be automated. We're starting to see it in supermarkets now. You're seeing self-checkout spaces, right, where people are checking out their own thing. And stores like Amazon are creating spaces where you just take things off the shelf and put them in your bag and then just walk out of the store. I've wondered for years why I can't just put bags in my shopping cart, have those bags filled with things, and then just walk out the store where something scans my shopping cart on the way out. Does that mean that cashier jobs in supermarkets are going away? Yes. But that doesn't mean that jobs in supermarkets are going away. Imagine an experience where you go into a supermarket and you can actually find someone when you're looking for some specific product. Imagine that experience. Imagine instead of having 10 people sit in these aisles, that now you have a person standing in every aisle in every supermarket. And they're not cashiers, but they're dietitians, food experts, cooks. Oh, I'm sorry, you're looking for what? Oh, have you tried this? Have you done this? Oh, you're cooking dinner for your wife for your anniversary. Maybe not use the 99-cent spaghetti. Let me show you a better product that you could use. All of a sudden, the roles in these supermarkets change and create better value. And this is happening across all jobs, not just low-income jobs. All our jobs are being automated to some degree. Roles within our jobs. Doesn't mean that all jobs are going to go, but it does mean that all jobs are being impacted. The first time you walked into an office and you started using a calculator, you were using a tool that automated part of your work. First time you were using a word processor, you had a tool that was automating part of your work. This has been going on forever. And this will continue, that all jobs will be impacted by automation. So, what do we pitch to our kids? What are the skills that they need for this future that they face? I'm going to show you a slide that I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. We asked employers all over the world. We work with the Economist Group. We asked employers all over the world, what are the most important skills that you need your employees to have? And the most fascinating thing about this slide is that it's not fascinating at all. It's the same slide that we've been looking at forever, right? There's not a person in this room who doesn't know this slide. Problem solving, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, literacy skills. We've been talking about this slide for so long, we call them 21st century skills. We're 18 years in the 21st century. We have kids who are starting in K-12 who are going to be around in the 22nd century. They're not 21st century skills any longer. But because we've been talking about this list for so long, we think we know what we should be talking about when it comes to these skills. We're not considering the future that we face. I'll give you a couple of examples. We're still asking our high school students, our fifth graders, anyone, because I talk to students all the time, and there's not a single hand that hasn't gone up when I ask these kids, how many of you have been asked what you want to be when you grow up? We still ask kids that question. What do you want to be when you grow up? That question makes no sense. That question used to make sense when we were kids, when we had like 20 jobs. We had general categories of jobs. Jobs didn't change that much. Now, we sit in this room knowing that 60% of the jobs of the future don't exist today. We sit in this room understanding that any job is going to change to some degree, and yet we still ask kids what you want to be when you grow up. What we should be asking them instead is, what problem do you want to solve? What problem spins in your head? Because it doesn't matter what the problem is. The problem can be anything. How to make cars go faster, how to make better light bulbs, how to make sure that this doesn't fall on the Michigan State group. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be a world-saving problem. Because the more important question is the second question. What do you need to learn to solve that problem? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to have to solve that problem? How can you start developing those knowledge, skills, and abilities? What classes should you be taking? Online, offline, in person, not in person, in a group, by yourself? What material is already out there? What research is out there? What blogs are out there? What are people saying about that problem? Who are the experts in that space, and what did they learn? And how do they solve the problem? Who's solving that problem today? When you ask a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? You're asking them, who do you want to work for? And we just covered the fact that they don't care. And that they understand that 70% of Americans are disengaged with their work. If you ask them what problem you want to solve, you get closer to what Daniel Pink talked about in his book Drive, about what motivates all of us as human beings. It's the same thing. Purpose, autonomy, mastery. What problem do you want to solve? How do you want to solve it? And what do you need to learn to solve it? You get a different results from kids when you ask them that question. And by the way, sometimes we underestimate their potential. This is a group of Google Science Fair winners from a couple years ago, and the girl there, Anne, in the middle, is one of my favorite winners because she was described as not your typical science student. Because we have this illusion in our head that only kids who are interested in science should participate in science fairs. That only the geeky kids are interested in science, and they're the ones who participate in science fairs. She wasn't your typical science kid, but there was a problem that she wanted to solve. She had a friend who lived in the Philippines, and her friend didn't have electricity. And she was upset that her friend couldn't read at night, couldn't do homework at night. So for her science project, she invented a flashlight that's powered by the heat of the human hand. And she was 15 years old when she did it. We underestimate the potential that this generation has if we give them the opportunity to solve problems. And so how do we create environments in higher education to say to the kids, come here, solve the problem that you're interested in solving. We're going to create the environment for you to solve the problem that you're interested in solving. You know, we talk about the idea of critical thinking skills is important, but the structures that we have set up don't support that. We give kids endpoints. We give them grades, A's, B's, C's. What's a C in journalism today? You pass. Does that mean you got 70% of the facts right? Is that good enough? What we need is models that let kids critically think, that they're constantly iterating, that they're constantly moving forward. If you used Google last night and used it again today, you used a different version of Google, almost guaranteed. because we update Google 600 times a year. There is no more new and improved Tide. You're not impressed by new and improved Tide. You just assume that it's new and improved, like everything else. How do we constantly iterate? How do we teach our kids that there is no C anymore, that they're just constantly iterating and moving forward? We talk about collaboration in education, but we don't mean it, because the model that we have is currently set up as a single-player sport. It's my 16-year-old who's responsible for his grades, his tests, his assignments. And the same was true for my daughter when she went through college. The problem is that we live in a team-based world. We live in a collaborative world. That's how work gets done. Imagine typical test, whether it's freshman year in college or 11th grade in high school. Typical test, not a quiz. Quizzes work. I teach 11th grade communication skills at a high school, and I would never give a kid a test. I do quizzes, but I never give tests. But typical test, and at the end of the test, imagine 2 kids in that class came up holding the test together, and they said, yeah, we were sitting back there, and there were some answers that he knew, and there were some answers I knew. So we decided to combine our skill set and work on this together. What would your reaction be? Why are we teaching kids that collaborating is cheating when that's how the world works? And being one of the few New Yorkers in the room, I don't want to get cheesy on you, but there is something beautiful about real collaboration. I've been at Google for 12 years, and the reason why I think I'm still there, I've been trying to get fired for the last 3 years, but the reason I'm still there is because I know that whatever I build, whatever idea I have, whatever strategy I come up with, when I put it in front of my team, it's going to get better. That's one of the things that we look for when we hire people at Google. We call it leadership. Do you think we mean by leadership, can you tell people what to do and they'll just follow you blindly? Can you force people to work the way you want them to work? No, we're asking them, can you collaborate? Can you build consensus? Can you influence? Can you take a step back and let someone else lead? How do we create collaborative models where kids are bringing their part of their genius to the table to plug in with other geniuses to solve the problems that they're interested in solving? And finally, we want to make sure that we're building strong digital leaders. And this isn't so much your fault as it is we have to do this much earlier in education. But information is coming at these kids at such a rate of speed that it's insane. 3.8 million Google searches, 400 hours of video gets uploaded on YouTube every minute. That means your 10-year-old will never be able to watch every video on YouTube, no matter how hard they try. And my kids have been trying very hard. It's not just using technology, it's how we use these tools. How do we teach them how to use these tools so that they become strong leaders in the space? They know how to vet information, make sense of information, that they know how to use information, that they know how to be safe online, private online, secure online, all the other things that we want them to do, that they can take advantage of all these tools that they have available to them. And let's not assume that just because they're born in this environment that they know how to use these tools. They don't. There was a Stanford study from a couple months ago that I just started digging into, where 82% of kids, elementary school kids, can't tell you the difference between a sponsored website and a real news site. 82%. Those kids are going to be 21 years old someday, and they're going to come work at one of my 12 companies, and I'm going to ask them to put together some financial data for me that I need to present to an investor, and I'm not going to know whether that information is real or not. And it's going to be your fault. And I'm going to go to jail. We need to teach them how to use these skills. And again, this isn't so much on the university level, but we need to make sure we're emphasizing that with our partners in K-12, that we want strong digital leadership skills from our students. So what we need more than anything is a shift. It isn't so much, again, that education is broken, it's that the world is changing, and we need to change with it. What we need to do is stop having old world arguments, like, should kids memorize things or not memorize things? Or it's important for kids to memorize. I just saw something on Facebook someone posted this thing about like, this generation of kids, they're losing their memory. They're losing their past because they're not creating photo albums. And I posted a response, something like, yeah, I remember back in 1841, people complaining about how these kids with their cameras, they're losing their memories because they weren't drawing their past. Let's stop having arguments about kids memorizing things and not memorizing things. The answer is both. We want kids to do both. I have a 3-year-old. If I get home tonight in time, I'm going to give her a bath. And I have those letters that stick to the side of the bathtub. Ever since she could sit in that bathtub, I've had those letters in there because I want to prep her for college. And I would pull out the A, and I go, what's this? Little tiny thing sitting in a bathtub, can barely sit there. And she'd go, A. I'm like, you're a genius. And then I pick up the B, and I go, what's this? And she says, A. I'm like, all right, we need to work on this. We want our kids to memorize lots of things. But at some point, how we convert information to intelligence is more important. Information is a commodity. It has no value. How we take that information and convert it into intelligence that we can use is important. I saw one of my favorite statistics is 7% of Americans can name you the first 4 presidents of the United States in succession, in a row. Oh, the vibe in a room just changed. Because I can point to one of you and ask you to name me the first 4 presidents. And if you don't know, you're going to be embarrassed. And other people are going to make fun of you for not knowing, even though they didn't know. Or I can give everyone in this room 30 seconds, and all of you can tell me who the first 4 presidents are. It has no value. Information on its own is meaningless. It's what we do with that information. So I would never have my students memorize the first 4 presidents. Instead, what I would ask my students is, what are the 3 things the first 4 presidents agreed on? What are the 3 things they disagreed on? Who won those arguments, and how did that shape our country? I bet you 20 years from now, they'll remember who the first 4 presidents are. It's just a different way to set up the world that we live in, given the world that we face and what's coming in the future. And so what we need to do is move away from the models that we know that work really well for the old economy. Listen, education as a subject has done some amazing things. Yes, our graduation rate is not that high, but it's much better than it was 100 years ago. The content that we teach kids today is stronger than it ever was before. We built a superpower of a nation on the back of the education system, from the first schoolhouses in Massachusetts through the GI Bill and everything else. I tend to walk in rooms like this and think about how education has shaped this room. But we also recognize that we need to move away from models that support the old world and move into models that we know work, where kids are making things and building things and moving things, and they're up and they're moving around and they're working together and collaborating, where technology isn't there to support, it's there to support and enable great learning. It's not the silver bullet. Education is the silver bullet. Technology is there to support and enable great education. And so that's the model. And I'll give you a Google example of what this looks like. This is what Google looked like when it started. This is Larry, and you guys know, and Sergey, leaving the coldness of Michigan and going to Stanford and setting up some computers and doing distributive computing differently, doing search in a different way. This is how it started. This is it. And then this is what Google looks like today. And there's 3 things I want to point out. First, this can now happen anywhere. You don't need to be in Palo Alto. You don't need to be in Northern California. Any 2 kids can grab any 2 laptops that are in this room right now, connect them to the powerful cloud that we have, whether it's through Google, Microsoft, or Amazon, and do amazing things that most of us in this room don't even understand. This could happen anywhere today, right here in Michigan, in a rural town. Doesn't have to be in Palo Alto in California. That's very exciting. But it's also very scary, because it also means it can happen in a rural town in India or a rural town in China. The playing field is becoming more and more even. That's one. Two, this is not what Google looked like on Monday, and then this is what it looked like on Thursday. This took 19 years of what we're talking about. 19 years of communication, collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, all the things that we want our kids to know how to do. It took us 19 years of doing that to get to this point. And then the third thing is that this is not what a data center will look like 19 years from today. There is no future data center, just like there is no future classroom. The future classroom starts on Monday, and then Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and then Thursday. Just like the future data center starts with the next light bulb, the next casing, the next wire, the next cooling system, the next server, the next hardware update, and so on, and so on, and so on. We live in a world of constant and consistent iteration, and we need a culture of that in our schools. Because at the end of the day, when we think about it, we're right where we need to be. Most people don't realize that it took 50 years for electricity to catch on. Thomas Edison had his plant up and running in 1891, and by 1890, only 4% of factories were using electricity. Yeah, I don't trust that electricity thing. I like my steam engines. It was 50 years before all factories were using electricity to power their machines and their plants. They had to change the models that they were using. They couldn't just replace their current models with electricity. They had to change what they did. We're in the same boat now, where technology is going to continue to accelerate. It's here to stay, and we need to change the models to reflect what we face in that space. And so, as I close out, I want to leave you with two thoughts. First, technology is just going to keep coming at us. We're never going to keep catch up to it. I think the biggest obstacle I feel with most adults is that they kind of take the technology and put it to the side because they just can't understand it. It's too much for them. Too bad. It's coming at you. And it changes every couple of months. This is a picture of my 3-year-old when we got a Google Home last Christmas. Google sent me a Google Home. So my wife and I took this thing, we set it up in the living room, and we were messing with it. Anyone have a Google Home or Alexa at home? They yell at their assistants all the time. So we set this thing up, and we're like, okay, let's connect it to the internet. And I said, okay, Google, what time is it? Okay, Google, what's the weather? I'm saying it softly because I don't want to set off your phones. Okay, Google, what's the weather outside? Okay, Google, play a song. My daughter, not involved in what my wife and I are doing with this thing, is watching us from the side. And she walks up between us, and she stands there, and she looks at this thing, and she says, okay, Google, play the Spider-Man song. As you can see by the cape she's wearing, she's a big Spider-Man fan. Nothing, no response. Okay, Google, play the Spider-Man song. No response. She picks the thing up and looks at me and goes, Papi, Google's broken. That was December. It's not broken anymore. There's an update that we made to this where it can recognize kids' voices. Inside this year. What's going to happen when she starts asking this thing real questions? Okay, Google, why is the sun hot? And this thing is going to recognize that she's 3 years old and provide her a 3-year-old answer. Or recognize that she's 10 years old and provide her a 10-year-old answer. Or better yet, doesn't give her an answer at all and starts giving her questions. And can bring her down a curiosity and inquiry-based model that I'm a big fan of, where we can change that. This technology is changing how we think about information and how we access information. I think about her like making fun of us in the future, like, you guys used to use your thumbs. Like. Speaking of that, I want to close out with this idea. I want you to think about a 5-year-old or my 3-year-old daughter with the technology that's around us. I want you to think about whatever technology it is that you have, whether it's your iPhone, your iPhone X. Anyone got the new iPhone? I need to see one. No one got one? You got one? Anyone? The new iPhone, don't drop it because they're really expensive. Or your MacBook or your Chromebook or your iPad or your iPad extra large. I don't know what they're called. Or whatever it is that you have. For me, it's this Pixel phone, Google Pixel. The latest and greatest technology from the most innovative company in the world. I'm kidding, this is a year old. This is already old. But I want you to think about the latest and greatest technology and then that 5-year-old and realize that this is the worst technology that 5-year-old will ever see in their life. Even the iPhone X or 10, whatever it's called, the worst technology they'll ever see. In 20 years, they're going to find this in the 50-cent box at a yard sale or at a garage sale or a thrift store. And they're going to want to buy it. They're going to, you guys, my dad had one of these. Because they're going to want to bring home to put on their shelf like a museum piece. The way I know some of you might have old technology sitting on your shelf like museum pieces. And they're going to say, you guys, I'm starting to remember things. You're not going to, she's going to be with her younger siblings or her younger friends. She's like, you guys are not going to believe this, but you see that right there? That's the port. And her younger friends are going to say, what do you mean? Like, I'm telling you, there's YouTube videos about this. But my dad had to plug this thing into the wall. And their younger friends are going to say, what do you mean? Like, take it out of the box, plug it in once to activate the nuclear battery, and then never? No! Every day he had to plug this into the wall. For hours. Those are the kids who are coming into our school system. Those are the kids with a completely different set of expectations about what's in front of them. A completely different future than what we faced. And we have to ask ourselves, do we have the right learning models for them? Do we have the right environment where they can start building the knowledge, the skills, and abilities that they're going to need to solve the problems that they face, the problems that they're interested in facing? That's why I hope we gather events like this, to have those discussions, to think about where we are. Thank you guys very much. Oh, we're doing Q&A. Yeah.
So I know that I found his words inspiring, especially when I'm thinking about the youth that we work with and some of the questions that he left us with. The question around really thinking about how they learn differently and how do we take advantage of that. This idea around all that we know from our experience in education research and how can we use technology to really support that, as well as this idea of starting with that question of what's the problem that you want to solve. I think that's something we often think about professionally in our work, but what does it look like to have those conversations with our students and just that shift in language and mindset and what might that mean for them. So with that, Jaime will continue to be with us through lunch today, and he welcomes continued conversation. So if you'd like to touch base, please do so. I'm going to share a couple housekeeping details. One, when we leave this room, we'll be moving into concurrent sessions, and they'll start at 10:45 promptly. They're going to end at 11:45, and that's when lunch will begin. It's going to be immediately after that first session. All of you have a lunch ticket on the back of your name tag. You're going to need that to participate in the lunch session, so make sure that you have it and you locate it. And with that, we just want to give you about 15 minutes to take care of your needs and head to the session that interests you most. So thanks for a great morning.